I used to believe Emily and I had the perfect marriage. We'd been together for nearly a decade, and honestly, everything seemed more than just fine. It felt like it was great. We shared the same hobbies, we were building our future together, and I truly believed she was happy. But lately, something felt off, like there was this strange distance between us. Have you ever had that gut feeling when things just don't seem right? That's exactly how it felt with her. She started getting distant, skipping family dinners, canceling plans with friends, all while working more. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just stress or maybe something going on at her job, but the more I paid attention, the harder it became to ignore the nagging feeling that something else was up. The first real red flag hit me when I stumbled across this old letter she had kept. At first glance, it didn't seem like a big deal, just a few lines mentioning an old friend from her past. Odd, sure, but everyone hangs on to random things, right? Still, something about it bugged me. I remember thinking, who is this old friend? And why haven't I ever heard about him in the entire 10 years we've been together? That's when the distance started to sink in deeper. Emily wasn't the same woman anymore. We used to have these deep conversations about everything, our future, our goals, where we saw our lives going. But now, it was like I was talking to a stranger. The late nights at work started piling up. She barely even glanced my way when we were in the same room. And the excuses? God, they just didn't add up anymore. Then came the receipts. They were from fancy restaurants, places I knew we'd never gone to. Not together anyway. I'm talking about expensive places, not the casual spots we used to hit. I sat there wondering, who the hell is she dining with? And these weren't quick bites either. We're talking full-course dinners, wine by the bottle. Her explanation? Work. But seriously, who goes to work dinners 4 nights a week? I knew I couldn't confront her without something concrete, so I started digging. I felt sick to my stomach doing it, but I had to know. I put a GPS tracker on her car and slipped some software onto her phone. I hated myself for it, but at that point I needed answers. I couldn't just sit around while she disappeared to God knows where with God knows who. That's when I uncovered the hotel. Every couple of weeks, she was making trips to this hotel, not far from home, just on the edge of town. I tracked her there. She'd stay for a couple of hours, then come back home like everything was completely normal. Like nothing had happened at all. So many little things started clicking into place, like the way she acted when we were around friends. One night at dinner, someone brought up old relationships as a joke, and Emily froze. She shut down the conversation so fast that everyone noticed. It was awkward, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. Then the weird phone call started. Anonymous numbers, people whispering things like, "You don't know the full story about your wife, and she's living a double life." At first, I thought it was a prank, but after everything else, I couldn't be sure anymore. It started feeling like my entire life was built on some fake reality that was falling apart piece by piece. The final straw came when I ran into one of Emily's old acquaintances, someone she never once mentioned to me. It was pure coincidence. We bumped into him at the grocery store. At first, it was casual chit-chat, but then he started talking about Emily's past, places she'd been, people she knew. It didn't match anything she'd ever told me. I felt like I was hearing about a stranger, not the woman I thought I married. By then, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know the truth anymore, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to keep digging, even though I knew it would probably destroy everything. I was about to uncover things that would change my life forever, things that would make me question not just my marriage, but everything I thought I knew about Emily. It's crazy how you think you know someone. I thought I had Emily figured out completely. I thought I knew her life before me, her childhood, her family, even her exes. But after meeting that old acquaintance, I knew something was very wrong. I couldn't let it go. Not with the hotel visits, the strange receipts, and those anonymous calls hanging over me. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about everything I thought I knew about her. That's when I made the decision to go through her phone. I get it. Maybe it sounds extreme, but at that point I had to. The GPS already told me she was sneaking off to that hotel, but now I needed to know who was meeting her there. So, I went through her messages, and that's when I found him, the old friend. The messages were cryptic, like she was trying to cover her tracks. But after reading enough of them, the truth became clear. They talked about meeting up, reminiscing about old times, going back to places they used to frequent. But the real kicker? None of it lined up with the stories Emily had told me about her past. Everything she'd shared with me over the last 10 years was a lie. Suddenly, I wasn't just worried about her cheating. I was starting to wonder if our entire marriage was built on deception. The worst part? She didn't just refer to him as some casual acquaintance. No, she called him her old friend, but the way she talked to him, it read like some cheesy romance novel. They weren't just catching up. There was a history there, something deeper, something that went far beyond what I'd ever imagined. That's when I realized I couldn't keep handling this on my own. I wasn't going to confront her without knowing every detail first. I needed cold, hard proof, something she couldn't lie her way out of. So I did what anyone in my shoes would do. I hired a private investigator. The guy I hired, David, was a real professional. He didn't need a lot of information, just the basics, her routine, the hotel visits, all the details I'd gathered. Then I waited, and let me tell you, that waiting period was torture. Every time Emily left the house, I couldn't help but wonder if today would be the day I'd finally find out what she was really doing. Each night she came home late, I'd sit there staring at her, trying to figure out if she was lying right to my face. It didn't take long for David to start feeding me updates. And the things he uncovered, well, they hit me like a freight train. Turns out Emily's old friend wasn't just some random guy from her past. No, he was her ex-husband. Yeah, the same ex-husband she told me she left behind years ago, saying he was a bad influence and that she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Apparently, that was just another lie in her endless web of deceit. They'd been back in contact for who knows how long, sneaking around behind my back like nothing had changed between them. She even traveled to see him when she claimed she was away for work. I felt sick to my stomach, but it didn't end there. David sent me photos, pictures of them together, and they weren't just casual meetups. These were romantic dinners, holding hands, kissing in public, like they were some star-crossed lovers reunited after all this time. Then came the videos, ones that left no doubt in my mind they weren't just meeting for a couple of drinks. And as if that wasn't enough, David found out she wasn't only seeing her ex. There were other men, other hotel meetups. It was like the more I uncovered, the dirtier it got. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the stack of evidence David had collected. Photos, videos, everything. I just stared at it all. The undeniable proof that my wife was nothing but a fraud. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I didn't even know who I'd been married to all these years. Was anything she ever told me even remotely true? And the worst part? I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I figured out my next move. But keeping it all inside was eating me alive. Our friends started to notice something was off. We'd all be hanging out, and they'd make these dumb jokes about relationships and cheating, having no idea I was living through the nightmare. And there Emily was, laughing right along with them, like she wasn't sneaking off to hotels with her ex-husband and God knows how many others. I wanted to expose her right then and there, tear down her perfect little facade in front of everyone. But I didn't. I kept my cool, gritted my teeth, and smiled through the pain. No one knew the truth. Not yet. One day in particular sticks out in my mind. We were at a barbecue with some friends, and one of my buddies started joking about how every wife has her secrets. It was meant to be harmless, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Emily was standing right there, sipping her drink, acting like she didn't have a care in the world, like she wasn't hiding this whole double life from me. I wanted to call her out right there in front of everyone, but I didn't. I just sat there playing along, feeling the anger burn inside. After that day, things with my friends got tense. I stopped wanting to be around them, not when they didn't know what was really going on. How could they? I was lying to them, just like she was lying to me, and I hated every second of it. David kept digging, And with every new piece of evidence, my rage grew. I couldn't stop thinking about how I was going to make her pay for this. But I knew it wasn't time to blow up yet. No, I needed to be patient, just like she'd been. She thought she was so clever, spinning all these lies, thinking she could play me for a fool. But she had no idea what was coming. Confronting Emily head-on? That would have been too easy. I didn't want her to just confess and move on. No, that would have been letting her off too lightly. I wanted to hit her where it really hurt. Her career, her reputation, and everything she'd spent years building. Just like she'd been slowly tearing apart our life together, I was going to do the same to hers. But I wasn't rushing this. I was going to take my time. First, I needed to get my affairs in order, literally. Divorce was inevitable, and there was no way I was letting her walk away with anything. I hired a lawyer, a real shark, someone who had dealt with situations like mine before. We didn't just talk about splitting up our assets. We discussed strategy. The first thing he advised was to collect everything in writing. Emails, messages, photos, videos, anything that could show the court just how deceitful and manipulative Emily had been. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about tearing her down in every way possible. And then there was Sarah. I'll be honest, she wasn't part of the plan at first. She was just a coworker, someone I interacted with every now and then. Sure, she was young and attractive, but I hadn't paid much attention to her before. That changed when she started flirting with me. Compliments, lingering glances. It didn't take long before I realized she was interested. And you know what? After everything Emily had done, I wasn't about to turn down the attention. I needed the distraction, and Sarah provided that. But more than that, I realized I could use her to my advantage. At first, my meetings with Sarah were purely professional, just lunch during work hours or a quick coffee between meetings. But before long, the dynamic began to shift. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, appreciating the way she laughed at my jokes or the way her hand would linger on my arm when she talked. I knew exactly where this was heading, and honestly, I didn't stop it. It wasn't like I was emotionally invested. How could I be after everything Emily had put me through? Sarah was just another piece in my game, and I intended to use her to my advantage. The first time Sarah and I hooked up, I made sure to record everything. Every kiss, every whisper, every moment, we captured it all. It wasn't about the sex, although I won't lie, it felt good to be with someone who actually wanted to be around me. But I wasn't foolish. I knew this was another weapon I could use. Emily thought she had secrets? Well, so did I, and when the time came, I'd make sure she found out about them. But I wasn't just sitting idly by, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash everything. No, I had already begun laying the groundwork. Through some of my contacts, I started spreading subtle rumors about Emily at her workplace. It was easy enough. People love to gossip, especially when it's about someone who's been climbing the corporate ladder as fast as she had. It started small, whispers about her personal life, comments about her frequent business trips, and how she seemed increasingly distracted at work. I didn't have to do much. People's imaginations did most of the heavy lifting. I even went as far as forging a few documents. Nothing major, just enough to make it seem like she was mishandling things at the office. I knew a few people in her professional circle who didn't exactly like her, and I made sure they had all the right information. Before long, Emily's reputation started to take a nosedive. People began questioning her professionalism, her ability to lead, and even her loyalty to the company. All the while, Emily remained completely clueless. She'd come home, still acting like everything was fine, still sneaking away to meet her ex, probably convinced I was too blind or too naive to notice. But I noticed everything. I was the one in control now, and she had no idea. Things with Sarah continued to evolve. At first, I kept it casual, not thinking too much of it. But over time, I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. She was easygoing, fun to talk to, and the complete opposite of the cold, distant Emily I had to deal with every day. We started spending more time together, after work on weekends. Sarah thought things were becoming real between us. And, to be honest, I started feeling that way too. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not after what Emily had done to me. This time, I was the one in charge. I kept Sarah in the dark about the bigger picture. She had no idea that I was using her as part of my revenge plan. As far as she knew, she was just falling for a guy whose marriage was unraveling. And maybe, in some twisted way, that was true. But this wasn't about her. This was about taking down Emily. As the weeks passed, I could feel everything moving toward the inevitable showdown. Emily started feeling the pressure at work. She'd come home stressed, complaining about her colleagues being distant, about how people were second-guessing her decisions. She couldn't figure out why her once flawless career was suddenly falling apart. I'd sit there, nodding, pretending to be the supportive husband, while knowing full well that I was the one pulling all the strings behind the scenes. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I had more planned. I was going to hit her where it hurt the most, and when it all came crashing down, she wouldn't even know what hit her. I was done wasting time. Emily needed to feel the full weight of everything I had been feeling since the moment I uncovered her betrayal. The first blow? That came when I made sure the evidence of her affair fell into the hands of exactly the right person, one of her biggest rivals at work. Emily had clawed her way to the top, and in doing so, she'd made plenty of enemies. She loved playing the role of the perfect professional, always smiling and shaking hands. But behind closed doors, she was ruthless. I knew exactly who would love to see her taken down a peg. Honestly, it was almost too easy. I dropped a few well-timed anonymous hints, leaked some photos that couldn't be easily explained away, and within days, the rumor mill was spinning out of control. By the time Emily showed up to the big client event, the whispers were already spreading like wildfire. She had no idea, of course. Why would she? As far as she knew, she was still in control, still hiding her dirty little secrets. That night, the event was packed. Everyone important in her professional world was there, clients, bosses, and the people who held her future in their hands. I was there too, playing the part of the doting husband, smiling at her side while she laughed and mingled with people who were about to turn on her. It was almost poetic. I stood back, watching as the whispers made their way to her. At first, it was just a few suspicious glances, nothing too obvious. But soon enough, the hushed conversation started. Emily noticed right away. She's sharp like that. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. I watched as the confusion spread across her face, trying to navigate through the crowd while pretending everything was perfectly fine. And then, the moment I'd been waiting for finally came. One of her colleagues, someone who used to be in her corner, walked right up and cornered her. They didn't say much, but I could see it in their eyes, the judgment, the disgust. They knew everything. And Emily? She stood there, stunned, as the realization started to sink in. The perfect little world she'd so carefully constructed was beginning to crumble around her, and she had no idea how they'd found out. I could see she was shaken. Later that evening, she tried to pull me aside, whispering about how strange everyone at the event was acting, how things felt off. "Do you think someone's spreading rumors about me?" she asked, her voice trembling. I just shrugged, keeping a straight face while I hid the smirk, trying to break through. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said casually, enjoying every second of it. Meanwhile, things with Sarah were becoming complicated. What started as a way to exact revenge was beginning to turn into something more. We'd been meeting in secret, keeping things discreet, but the tension was building. It wasn't just about sex anymore, though that was certainly part of it. Sarah was getting emotionally invested, and I could tell she was starting to see through me. She'd asked me more than once if I was really ready to move on from Emily, if I was sure this was what I wanted. Of course, I lied. I told her exactly what she wanted to hear. "Yeah, I'm ready," I'd say, kissing her, knowing damn well my mind was still on Emily's downfall. But Sarah wasn't dumb. She was starting to pick up on the cracks in my story, sensing that I had ulterior motives. Still, she was in too deep by then. She thought she cared about me, and I knew that would keep her from walking away. But back to Emily. After that event, things spiraled out of control for her. The rumors spread like wildfire, and her professional reputation was taking a nosedive. Clients started doubting her, colleagues were pulling away, and I got to watch it all unfold with a twisted sense of satisfaction. I'd set the destruction in motion, and there was no stopping it now. The best part? She had no clue I was behind it. Emily became paranoid, accusing people at work of gossiping about her. And she'd even come home venting to me, acting like she had no idea why her career was suddenly in free fall. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the one orchestrating her downfall, and she was too wrapped up in her lies to even suspect it. I started pushing her, little by little, hoping to get her to crack and admit what she'd been doing. I'd throw in comments about trust and loyalty, about how secrets always have a way of coming to light. But every time she'd deny it. She was stubborn, refusing to admit the truth, even when it was staring her right in the face. I'd look her straight in the eyes and ask, "Are you sure there's nothing you need to tell me?" And she'd stare right back with that cold, dead expression and say, "No, of course not." It was infuriating, but at the same time, it was kind of satisfying. She still thought she was in control. She had no idea the walls were closing in on her. As for Sarah, she was starting to figure things out. She wasn't stupid. Even though we were still meeting up regularly, she could feel the emotional distance growing between us. She'd ask me outright, "Are you just using me to get back at your wife?" I'd always brush it off, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the hesitation before she let things go further. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I knew I'd have to make a decision soon. Either I was going to keep using Sarah for my revenge, or I'd have to come clean with her. But at that moment, I was too focused on Emily. The real show was just beginning, and there was no way I was giving up control now. I'd been planning this day for weeks. Every move I made, every bit of evidence I collected, was leading to this moment. The day I'd finally confront Emily and let her know that I wasn't the clueless husband she'd taken me for. I wanted her to feel the humiliation, the weight of everything she'd done. And the best part? She had no idea it was coming. The lawyers had been involved for a while now, but this was the day we were supposed to sit down and go over the divorce terms. Emily thought she was going to walk away with a nice deal. Little did she know, I had one last trick up my sleeve. I made sure her lawyer would be there too. He came in looking smug, probably convinced he'd secure her a sweet settlement. He had no idea the bomb I was about to drop. We all sat down in the meeting room. Emily, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. She was dressed as she always was, professionally polished, pretending she still had everything under control. But underneath that exterior, I could tell she was nervous. Her career had been crumbling for weeks now. She was losing clients, her colleagues weren't returning her calls, and her reputation was barely hanging on. Still, she thought she had control over me, over this divorce. She had no idea how wrong she was. I calmly slid the folder across the table. Inside were the photos, the texts, the emails, everything that tied her to her ex-husband and the other men she'd been sneaking around with. I didn't say a word at first. I just watched as she opened the folder and started flipping through the evidence. Her hands began to shake. "Where the hell did you get this?" she hissed, her voice low but laced with panic. I leaned back, crossing my arms, letting the moment sink in. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out, Emily? You've been lying to me for years. This isn't just about cheating. You've built your entire life on lies. And now, it's all out in the open." Her lawyer, trying to keep his composure, looked visibly shaken. He cleared his throat, already scrambling to find a way out. "We can discuss this privately," he suggested, his tone betraying his nerves. But I wasn't interested in keeping things quiet. Not anymore. "Oh no, we're not handling this behind closed doors," I said, my voice steady and calm. "In fact, I think it's time everything comes out into the light. I'm done with the lies, and I'm done playing the nice guy." Emily's face turned pale, the realization hitting her hard. She knew what was coming next, the final blow. I had orchestrated it perfectly. A big corporate dinner, one of those events where all the key figures from her professional life would be present. I made sure the evidence leaked just before the event. By the time she arrived, the damage would already be done, and everyone would know the truth. And sure enough, it played out exactly how I imagined. When she walked into the room that evening, you could feel the shift in energy. People were staring, whispering, moving away from her like she was contagious. Still oblivious to the full extent of what was happening, Emily tried to go about her usual routine, smiling, shaking hands, pretending everything was fine. But then the questions started, slowly at first, small talk about her personal life, questions she couldn't easily dodge. Then, someone I can't even remember who cut through the pretense. "So, how's your ex-husband doing? Still meeting him on the side?" Her face dropped. She tried to laugh it off, but it was too late. The room had already turned against her. Her feeble attempt at an excuse fell flat, and no one believed her anymore. It was over. That's when she snapped. Right there, in front of everyone, Emily lost it. She started rambling, blaming me, blaming her job, even blaming the pressure of our marriage. But the more she talked, the worse it got. No one was buying her excuses. The people who once hung on her every word, the colleagues and so-called friends she relied on, had all turned their backs. It was brutal, and I watched it unfold with a cold, detached sense of satisfaction. After that night, everything unraveled quickly. The divorce was inevitable, but now I was firmly in control. She knew it, her lawyer knew it, and even mine was grinning as we went over the final negotiations. Emily tried to push back, tried to hold on to whatever she could, but I wasn't about to let her off easy. I made sure she lost a significant portion of our assets. Everything she'd worked so hard for, gone. The life we built, in shambles. When we met again with the lawyers to finalize the terms, the atmosphere was tense. Emily sat across from me, looking like a shell of the woman she used to be. Her lawyer was doing his best to salvage anything for her, but there wasn't much he could do. The evidence was overwhelming. The affairs, the lies, the money she'd blown on her secret trips. It was all laid out, irrefutable. She tried to make eye contact with me a few times, probably hoping she could talk her way out of this one last time, like she had in the past. But I was done. I barely said a word, just nodded along as my lawyer dismantled every argument her side tried to make. By the time we wrapped up, it was obvious she was finished. After the papers were signed, she made one last desperate attempt. "James, please, can we just talk? I didn't mean for any of this to happen. We can fix this. You don't have to go through with it." I didn't even bother to look at her. "There's nothing left to talk about, Emily. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them." And that was it. I walked out of that room, leaving her to face the wreckage of her life. The divorce was finalized, and I walked away with the upper hand. Emily? She had nothing left. No career, no reputation, no friends. She was utterly alone. After the divorce was finalized, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, relief. Like a weight had been lifted off my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The months of planning, tracking, and exacting my revenge had drained me, but it had been worth it. I came out on top, with most of our assets in my name. Emily? Her career was in ruins. Her once adoring colleagues had abandoned her, and even her ex didn't want anything to do with her anymore. She was left with nothing, and I had no intention of looking back. What happened next caught me off guard. It wasn't just the satisfaction of watching Emily's life fall apart that brought me relief. It was the realization that I could finally close that chapter for good. For years, she had been this toxic weight dragging me down, but now, with her gone, I could focus on something else, something real. That's when things with Sarah started to change. What had started as a piece in my revenge plan had slowly transformed into something much deeper. Sarah and I had been seeing each other for months, and at first, I'll be honest, it was all about getting back at Emily. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about her entirely. Sarah became more than just a distraction. I started looking forward to our time together, not just for the physical side of things, but for the real connection we were forming. It wasn't instant, though. After everything I'd been through, I wasn't about to jump blindly into another relationship. I kept my guard up, and Sarah noticed. She'd asked me about my past, about what I wanted going forward, and for once, I didn't have all the answers. But one thing was clear: I was done with revenge. I didn't want to keep living in the past. I wanted something real, something that wasn't built on lies or manipulation. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I grew closer. We started talking about the future, about making a fresh start. Eventually, we made the decision to leave the city and move somewhere new. It was time to leave behind the mess that had been my life with Emily. We found a place, not too fancy, but it felt right. It felt like home, a place where we could rebuild without the shadow of my past haunting us. I even began to consider starting a business with Sarah. She was sharp, always had a good head for business, and together, I saw real potential. It wasn't just about creating something professional. It was about building a life together. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I wasn't consumed by anger or thoughts of revenge anymore. My focus was on the future. Meanwhile, Emily was spiraling. Word got back to me that she had left the city, trying to start over somewhere else. But her past followed her everywhere. Every time she applied for a new job, her reputation would catch up with her. No one wanted to hire someone who had been exposed so publicly for her betrayals. Even her family, who had always stood by her, began to distance themselves. They couldn't look past the lies, the affairs, the complete disaster she'd made of her life. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Emily tried to reach out to me. I'm not sure what she was expecting. Maybe she thought I'd feel guilty about how things ended, or that I'd be open to some kind of reconciliation. But when her name flashed on my phone, I didn't even hesitate. I ignored the call, just like I ignored the dozen or so messages she sent afterward. Emily had made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I didn't know her anything. I heard through the grapevine that she had fallen into a deep depression, that her life was unraveling, with no job, no friends, and no one left to turn to. There was a time when I might have felt sorry for her, maybe even considered helping her. But that time had passed. Emily wasn't my responsibility anymore. Not after everything she'd done. She was on her own. One evening, Sarah and I met up with some old friends. People who had known Emily, people who had seen everything unfold. They were shocked by how different I seemed. "You look like a new man," one of them said. "I can't believe how much you've changed." And they were right. I wasn't the same man who had started this whole mess. I wasn't bitter or angry anymore, consumed by revenge. I had grown, moved on. I wasn't defined by what Emily had done to me. She was a part of my past, but she no longer had a say in my future. As the night went on, the conversation inevitably turned to Emily. Someone asked how she was doing. I just shrugged. "I wouldn't know," I said casually. "I don't keep up with her anymore." They were surprised. I guess they expected me to still care, to still be tangled up in what happened between us. But the truth was I didn't. Emily's downfall was her problem, not mine. I had moved on, and for the first time in years, I was truly free. Sarah and I left the dinner that night, hand in hand, ready to continue down the new path we were carving out together. My life had been shattered, rebuilt, and transformed. I wasn't the same man, and I was okay with that. I was ready for whatever came next. Emily was just a memory now. Nothing more than a reminder of how far I'd come and how much I had changed.